Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Tribal Council podcast.
We're on this podcast, Survivor Represents Our Life.
When it's canceled, so are we.
My name is Ethan Kronk, and I'm here with my co-host,
Connor Boudreau.
And today we're going to be talking about the 15th placers in the history of the new era. So, we've talked about 18th, 17th, and 16th placers. Those videos have been doing really well, and we're very happy to see it, and we are very excited to get into the 15th placers. So without further ado, let's just get into it and talk about our first entry. In 9th place, we have Sean Edwards. Now, Sean started off on the disastrous Lulu tribe. He found himself in a majority alliance with Sabaya and Caleb. He survived 2 tribal councils. Actually, he survived 3, my bad. And, found himself in a bit of a tricky situation with the swap. So why do we have him in last, given all of that? You'd think that all of that might be enough to have him a little higher on his list. Connor, why don't you take the floor on why Sean is in last place here?
Well, things are pretty consistent for us. We have a general consensus on the outcome of people that leave the game for reasons that are not required, such as a medical evacuation or, some kind of injury that would affect your livelihood. Quitting, however, does not fall into that, and quitting is exactly what happens here. Sean decides that he wants to go back home, and for that exact reason, we put him last. It's kind of just be how it is on this channel going forward. You hear someone quit, they're going to be ranked pretty poorly for it, and Sean's game is overall probably a little bit better than last, but,
He
if
quit.
you quit, you did the opposite of winning.
He quit, and he quit because he missed his husband. And I'm sorry, Sean. I'm sure your husband's a great guy, but everyone out there that has a husband misses him. You're the only one who quit over it. So, I don't know. Just saying. Not really much else to say. I mean, he was not a super major presence on the show. He was definitely the third wheel in that alliance he was a part of. Overall, just not a super memorable player. He quit in a situation where he wasn't even going to be the vote. It was going to be Sifu. So, yeah, that sucked. And I'm ready to move on. And I'm ready to move on to a legendary 15th placer, Bhanu Gopal.
And let me kick this off by saying the only reason Bhanu was not last is genuinely because he doesn't quit.
Bhanu's a player who came out to win 1,000,000 hearts, not to win $1 million. I don't know if he succeeded anyways, despite that alternative goal. He does find himself not so much in a majority alliance. He finds himself in the outs alongside Jess, but luckily for him, Jelinski ends up fumbling his position in the majority alliance right at the first vote. They take out Jelinski. They end up viewing Jess as a bigger liability than Bhanu. At the second tribal council of the series, they vote out Jess. Third tribal council, there's talks of maybe getting rid of Kenzie. Probably wasn't going to be what was going to happen. Bhanu was probably going home. Randon gets medevaced though, and Yanu is saved. So we hit episode 4. Yanu loses yet another immunity challenge. They go to yet another tribal, and Bhanu just goes through the stages of grief right in front of our eyes. It's honestly incredible the way that it's edited together to show the stages of grief. You have denial, right? Bhanu, he's going out looking at the idol, thinking, I can still survive. I can still do this. My game's not over yet. Followed immediately by anger. Bhanu starts yelling at God for putting him on Survivor, and it's quite the sight to behold. I'm not even sure what God he's yelling at, but he's really pissed off that he got put on Survivor only to get voted out in 15th place. And then he goes straight into bargaining, literally on his knees, begging Tiffany to consider keeping him, which we've never seen anything like that on Survivor. And then depression, literally laying on the floor in the middle of the forest, completely defeated. Finally, at tribal council, he goes through the acceptance phase, and then his torch is snuffed. And it's a beautiful story. It's a wild ride. A lot of people hated the Bhanu show on Survivor 46, but honestly, part of the reason why I love 46 so much is that I find the whole Bhanu arc entertaining. However, entertaining does not make for a great game. This is just objectively horrible, horrendous, like awful. That being said, I think we can move on to our number 7 pick. We have Lindsay Carmine. Lindsay was on Survivor 43. She was on the Coco Tribe. Again, another player who actually did find herself in a majority alliance with Carla, Cassidy, and James. So, Connor, what exactly happens to cause her to be the first voted out of her tribe, considering she finds herself in a 4-person alliance?
You know what? Just a lot of complaining in a paranoid way, and just so much frustration seems to amount from all of her tribe mates, because I don't know, she just can't stop complaining and paranoid conversation, and oh, you're gonna vote me out, oh, don't blindside me, guys, oh, I promised somebody to be an ally, and it's just like, you are doing everything wrong. Just, all right, they've reassured you a couple times, shut up and eat it. If you're worried that much, it's either going to happen or it's not. I don't think there's ever been a Survivor player who is not paranoid enough after being paranoid, and that led to them being voted out.
Yeah.
Whereas being stupidly paranoid to the point where it's frustrating to watch as a viewer, because she completely blows up her spot for no reason. It's like it's that bad. So, I mean, the biggest thing for her is at least she finds herself in a majority alliance. She puts herself in a place where she could play a decent game if she doesn't get stupidly paranoid. But it is a absolute blow up of a Survivor game.
Yeah.
For all the wrong reasons.
Yeah. I mean, her game can really be summed up in one word, and that one word is paranoia. Just, blows up such a good spot. And we'll talk about players later on this list who you could argue don't find themselves in as good a spots as Lindsay, or maybe make comparable mistakes, but it's just something about the way that Lindsay goes from majority alliance with very obvious target in Geo to completely flipping her own alliance against her is just so impressively bad that she had to go this low on the list. I guess we can move on to our number 6 player, Brad Reese. I liked what he said about Broccoli. Didn't like much else about his game. Definitely overplayed, which is fun. It's fun to see this older guy on the tribe overplay. We don't see that too often. A lot of times, older players tend to underplay, and younger players tend to overplay. That's just a very common correlation to be found on Survivor. But Brad, he breaks the mold. He's what?
54? 53, something like that.
He's currently 54, so he's maybe 49, and he's out there playing like a 21-year-old who is more excited to be out there than to actually try to win. He's running around the island, finding all these advantages, not really keeping them all that hidden. His only real ally is Jeannie, of all people. I would say the main reason I would have him above Lindsay is A, he survives a tribal, and B, at that tribal, he kind of plays a pretty significant role in determining who the vote is. It was going to be JD. And, technically, I do think Brad is sort of part of this initial 4-person alliance. I don't know, it's kind of nebulous. But at the end of the day, he does throw out Sarah's name, and while it's ultimately Shan who I think makes the decision, Brad's the first person to throw out Sarah's name. He kind of controls a vote in that first episode, and it's just that first episode where he does control a vote and he does survive a tribal council that puts him above Lindsay for me, but he does make a lot of mistakes in this game.
Yeah, I think at the end there you kind of started nailing on what I was going to talk about mostly, and that's he did at least get through a tribal council. He did at least somewhat help in targeting out a player for the most bizarre of reasons, not necessarily, but, a somewhat weird reason, and did create somewhat of a bond with the player, did find advantages, although completely misplaying the ability to use them by talking about them so much that I think someone from the next island over might have known about it. So, you know, there's some clear flaws to how Brad chooses to play the game, which I think is so wonderful, especially because, all these players talk preseason about who they want to play like, and, you know, I often find some of them are hilarious to look at. Brad's especially. This is the opposite of what Brad said he was going to do, and I think that's so funny.
Who does he say he wants to play like?
Take a wild guess.
I I couldn't possibly guess. I could not possibly guess. If I were to go based off how he actually played, I would guess that he's trying to emulate Tony Vlachos very poorly.
He's trying to emulate Boston Rob, and says, quote, "We don't have the same personality, but his thoughtful strategic play is how I see myself playing. Brother, none of what you did there was thoughtful. Nothing was well thought out."
Hey, you know what? Publicly announcing in front of the entire tribe, I think we should vote out Sarah while she's standing right in front. Actually, no, I was going to say that's a very Boston Rob move. No, it isn't. That's a very Russell Hantz move. And Russell Hantz did it to Boston Rob, and he sat there and went, "Russell, you're a fucking idiot." So, moving on, we can talk about our number 5 player. And, we kind of talked about flipping this player and Brad, but honestly, after all of our conversations have gone through, this I feel like is the line between the bad players who came in 15th and the players who, actually showed some potential, actually could have made it a decent bit further, who I actually feel like, maybe went home for some pretty illegitimate reasons. And kicking off that part of the list, we have Claire Rafson. Now, with Claire, I think she's one of those players who I just don't understand why her tribe voted her out. Like, I hear their reasoning, and it just doesn't compute to me. Because, first of all, Franny, fully on board with working with Claire. Matt, probably on board with working with Claire, considering Franny's on board. I don't think Matt was, ever going to be dead set about voting out Claire. Unfortunately, Matt loses his vote. So they really need one of Danny or Heidi, and unfortunately those two are so close that they come in a package deal. For some reason, Danny is dead set on voting out Claire. Why? Because she's not contributing in the challenges. Why? Because nobody's letting her contribute in the challenges. Right? They are unanimously, as a tribe, coming to the consensus that Claire is going to sit out at every single at every single challenge. They do not give Claire an opportunity to even start to prove herself in challenges, and then they go, "Claire, why aren't you competing in challenges?" Because you won't let her. And then that's why you're going to vote her out when you have Josh on the tribe who nobody trusts? I think that, combined with the fact that she had an ally in Franny who was genuinely willing to work with her to the point where she campaigned to try to save her, puts her above any of the players we've talked about so far. That being said, her social game and was clearly not the best. Her contribution in challenges was non-existent, and you can knock that against her or you can't. Either way, I think she kind of belongs here at number 5.
She became the first Survivor contestant to ever be voted out without having competed in an immunity challenge. Took 45 seasons for that to happen, or 44 seasons, and becomes the reason that the episode reset gets implemented in season 45 is literally because of her. So that's a fun fact. But unfortunately, I guess really what it came down to is somehow Claire just made the less vocal necessary alliance. Because had she been on the more vocal side, they might let her contributed, I guess. I don't know if that's necessarily an accurate statement either, because I don't know if they would have worked with her properly, but I guess that's the best argument I can say for as to what really she did wrong. I can't exactly say that she was the worst player ever, but she was again, very much on the line of had potential, but really didn't get to see it.
That being said, we move on to our number 4 player, and we have the 15th placer on Survivor 47, Kishan Patel.
So the big thing that put Kishan above a lot of other people, but below others, we can start off with a very good thing. He does actually have a good say and like is a defining part of getting someone out of the game of Survivor, which is something that nobody below him in this placement can say that they did. However, he got roamed and he got Genevieve'd. Yeah, like just Genevieve decides to kick her game into gear. It's almost as if she woke up from like hibernation or something, and all of a sudden goes completely into strategic gameplay. Goes, you are doing too much, and I don't like it. Because at the end of the day, Kishan is playing a fairly solid strategic game for all of 6 days. And however, on day 7 when they lose the challenge, because Rome can't do a single puzzle to save his life, Genevieve and Rome managed to pull things off. That being said, there is also an advantage, or I guess a disadvantage that comes into play. Rome pulls some antics and, kind of forces Saul's hand, and ultimately, Kishan just doesn't have the pull alongside Teeny, who, again, great ally, but just doesn't have the pull to make things happen.
Especially without their vote, I believe.
Yes, there is a lost vote. So, yeah, it gets really messy in that vote round, and ultimately, Kishan doesn't get to vote. Rome votes him twice, and Genevieve and Soul vote against Kishan. It's tough, but at the end of the day, he does actually have a bit of momentum going into that episode, into that vote round. It kind of falls apart, but I mean, there is some solids to look at with Kishan. Definitely some upside. Definitely has like a dominant position in deciding a vote. Unlike Brad, who we mentioned, kind of affects a vote and does do it in a very poor way. At least gets his objective done. Kishan does it in a very effective way that doesn't completely blow up his spot.
Third place, the 15th placer of Survivor 49, Jeremiah, he's a player who we had to talk about a lot because it's tough to say how things would have gone for him if Jake didn't get medically evacuated. But let's start with what we do know. We know that he finds himself in somewhat of a majority alliance of 4. It's kind of a weird alliance, but it definitely exists. And they take out Nicole, they take out Annie at the first 2 tribal councils. He survives those 2 votes, he's in the majority, and it's perfect. It's all hunky-dory for Jeremiah. However, he recognizes his position at the bottom of the 4, and he does start to think about ways to potentially do something about that. The question is, how much would he have really been able to do? And it's just something that's hard to answer. What's a little bit maybe less difficult to answer is whether or not he actually would have gone home had Jake not been medevaced. Obviously, there's a chance that Kella wins a challenge with Jake. I don't know how large that chance is, but
you're funny. That's a very insignificant chance, but
yeah, especially
you are bringing up a good point.
It's definitely possible. Even if they lose, I do think that Soph goes home. Alex definitely seemed to want Soph gone more so than Jeremiah. I don't think Jake is pulling hard for Jeremiah to go home. Ultimately, I don't think Jeremiah does go home in 16th place either way. Now, maybe Kelly loses another challenge, and then Jeremiah goes home in 15th, even still. But at the end of the day, who else in this list can say that they outlasted 3 other people on their tribe, aside from Sean? Jeremiah didn't quit. Almost didn't even go home in 15th. He only goes home in 15th because Sophie eavesdrops on his and Alex's conversation, lies to Alex about Jeremiah leaking a bunch of information to her, and Alex changes his mind because he originally wanted to vote out Sophie and votes out Jeremiah. Had that not happened, maybe we see Jeremiah come in 2nd place. I mean, it's I don't think it's likely, but
Okay, well, let's hold your horses on that. I
I
don't
think he
think
makes the
Jeremiah
merge.
was that positioned, but yeah, he probably has a much better chance of getting through to the merge at the very least. I think he survives well in the swap. I think he would have been adaptable enough.
Hmm.
But I mean, Jeremiah's position in the game is a little harder to judge, as you mentioned, because well, we get interrupted by a secret, and unfortunately, not just Jake, but that entire tribe suffers from the outcome of that for a decent bit of the game.
But he does not crack our top two. Instead, at number two, we have the 15th placer of Survivor 42, Jenny Kim. Now, Jenny goes home in one of the most insane tribal councils in Survivor history. I don't think that's a controversial take. That Jenny tribal was just. I was floored. Watching that live, Connor, you didn't get to watch that live. That tribal council, probably insane on a binge watch. Watching that shit live was truly one of the most insane experiences that I've ever had as a Survivor fan. Jenny has an alliance of two, but she's used her alliance of two with another alliance of two to form an alliance of four. Unfortunately, two people from that alliance of four lose their votes. One of them loses it last second. Now, Chanel, I don't know what the fuck she was thinking. She knew how important her vote was. She knew that her vote was crucial, that this was a vote with the slimmest of margins. And she's like, you know what? Because she knew that Mike didn't have a vote. And she says, you know what? I'm going to risk my vote. Why? Why the fuck would she do that? And she does it, I believe, in a journey where she's playing the like sort of prisoner's dilemma against Omer. What did she get from Omer that indicated, oh, this guy would never risk his vote? You know, like, I just don't understand that decision from Chanel. It completely screws over her entire alliance, and Jenny gets caught in the crosshairs. She plays a very good social game. She proves to be an asset in terms of puzzles. But she goes home due to two of her allies losing a vote, and then her final ally who had a vote just being kind of spineless and not being willing to even pretend that he's willing to go to rocks. Like, it just doesn't make any sense. It's so much bad gameplay from her allies, and the only thing I think you can discredit Jenny for is aligning with fucking idiots. That's harsh, okay? But, you know, I think there's some truth to it.
I think what I can really add to that is, unfortunately, you can only play the game you're given. Her tribe is full of people that aren't willing to play proper social strategic gameplay in key moments for most of those players. I would say there's maybe one exception on that tribe, and you can kind of see as the game devolves for that tribe,
Well,
slowly over time.
I think Mike, High, and Lydia are all passable players.
Passable doesn't mean they should be your best allies. Passable doesn't mean that you made a good alliance in a good situation. But unfortunately, you can only align with people on your tribe during the tribe stage to actually make a helpful alliance. And I mean, Jenny plays the card she's given. Unfortunately, the cards just aren't high enough to win the hand.
I guess the point I'm trying to make is like, Mike is a good ally if she hitches her wagon too. Now, instead of taking that duo and fusing it with the duo of Daniel and Chanel, two players who both make baffling decisions, maybe they could have aligned themselves with High and Lydia, and then we could have gone after Daniel or Chanel. And maybe High and Lydia wouldn't have both lost their votes. Or one of them, or neither of them would have lost their votes. Maybe High and Lydia would have at least pretended to be willing to go to rocks if that were on the table. I mean, High was potentially willing to go to rocks for Lydia. So those would have been better allies, I think, for Jenny if she could have, formed those bridges. And I think she probably could have. Unfortunately, she chooses Daniel and Chanel. And those are just not two players that you want to align yourself with, because one of them will make a baffling decision to lose her vote, and one of them will make a baffling decision to just completely sell his entire alliance out at Tribal Council. But at the end of the day, I mean, Jenny just gets extremely unlucky. And unlucky is one of the best things that you can be if you want to be ranked highly on one of these lists. So, I guess if that's what she was going for, she actually got pretty lucky. We move on to the number one best 15th placer of Survivor's New Era, Thomas Krottinger. Thomas Krottinger, I don't know. One of my top picks in terms of pre-mergers to see come back in the new era. Very fun and entertaining villain. Someone who, does play a pretty decent game up until his elimination. Connor, what do you have to say about Thomas? Do you want to give us a little recap of his game?
Let's see. Incredible alliance. California Girls. That happens to exist with multiple key players that go really far into the season. Happens to be on a tribe at the start that does incredibly well in terms of challenges. Has a really good secret alliance with Bianca that not everyone realizes is there. And then swaps into a situation where he gets immunity idled. You just get idled out in a swap. There's really not much you can say that you've done wrong in the game other than just draw the wrong buff.
Yeah.
Like, that's about where Thomas's game goes wrong. And, I mean, he also gets gamed by Kyle and Camilla. Congratulations. We know how that season goes and exactly why that's a very important thing going forward. And it's part of the reason I'm surprised no one picked up on it throughout the entire season. But hey, bygones be bygones. Thomas was the first victim of Kyle and Camilla. And Thomas does an incredible job of putting himself in a great situation in just about any other world where he doesn't draw the wrong buff. Or maybe one of his allies draws the right buff.
Not to mention, Kyle and Camilla strongly considered idling out Shaheen. So, even then, there's a very real possibility that Thomas could have survived this Kyle and Camilla nuke, but I do think Kyle and Camilla make the correct decision. I mean, they identify that Thomas likely has an advantage from the journey, which is true. They identify that he's maybe just as sneaky of a player as Shaheen, which is definitely true. But overall, he's in such a good position on that original Loggy tribe. And then, he doesn't even necessarily get swap screwed. He's got his California Girls, but Kyle's got an idol. And at that point, what do? You can't split your votes. They don't even know that Kyle and Camilla are as close as they are. But again, even if they were able to pick up on that, they can't split their votes. I guess, I suppose Thomas does have an extra vote, I believe. Which in that case they could have used the extra vote to split their votes.
Is it an extra vote or is it like a block or steal a vote? I don't remember. Vote steal.
Okay, a vote steal even better, right? They could have made it 4-1, right? They could have split their votes, taken one of them out. So that's the big mistake that puts Thomas in 15th place, is that he did not use his steal vote to allow the California Girls to split their votes between Kyle and Camilla. But that's you have to suspect that Kyle has an idol and that Kyle and Camilla are extremely close for that to even be something that makes sense to do. So I just don't hold that too much against him, and I just look at the phenomenal game that he was playing up until that point. And maybe I'm slightly biased by the fact that I just want to see Thomas play again so badly, but I do think he plays better than all the other players that we've mentioned so far. I think there's an argument to be made between him and Jenny, and that's kind of it. I don't know if you
to kind of shut down that argument pretty quickly, Jenny ends up in a alliance with people that don't exactly play a very strategic game. Whereas the California Girls, you can see throughout the game, start to finish, play a much better game, albeit
True.
maybe a little more boring, but you can't deny the fact that they all place pretty well in the game. They all go pretty far in the game. They all do have a significant impact on the season, whereas not the exact same extent for Jenny, and it's not as clear and convincing or as dominant. And it's, again, also Bianca, right? Jenny had all of her allies and alliances kind of in one spot, whereas because there was a swap at this point, Thomas has alliances among multiple tribes with multiple people, and it's split around and has power in lots of different places. Also has hold of an advantage that Jenny doesn't. So I think there's just a lot of extra things you can talk about with Thomas that really put him over the top.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, like, as far as the advantage goes, Jenny, she had an opportunity to go for an advantage, but it would have proven to be the wrong move to try to do that, and she makes the very smart move in keeping her vote safe. And as far as the swap goes, Jenny can't control whether or not there is or is not a swap. I think the fact that, Thomas is able to form these multifaceted connections, right? Like, Jenny has a duo, and then her duo and another duo form sort of a duo of duos, whereas Thomas forms a trio, but then he also forms a duo, but then he also does kind of create inroads with Star, even. Like, I just think he just has this web of relationships, and the swap truly does not help him. I mean, we'll see. It does not help him or Bianca, for that matter. But we'll talk about that in the next video. So, I do see where you're coming from with just the multifaceted connections. He displays quite a bit of strategy. He's kind of sneaky. He's almost a villain. But at the end of the day, what are you going to do when Kyle and Camilla want you gone? It's Kyle and Camilla, one of the best duos I think we've seen in the new era. So, that being said, anything else to say about Thomas's game before we wrap things up?
No, honestly, there's not really much interesting little tidbits or fun facts I can add, other than I guess somehow Thomas was the first person eliminated from that alliance and the first person not to come from one of the worst tribes ever of the new era eliminated from season 48.
Mm-hmm. That is true. The first non-Vula.
Yeah, I will say this. I will throw it out there. You can tell me if you disagree. I think one of the coolest alliance names in Survivor history was created by Thomas.
Yeah,
The California Girls.
I do think
It's very clever.
I think the California Girls I think it's a funny name. I think it's a very funny name. They're all from California. None of them are girls. It's great.
And then, yeah, I think we nailed it on the head for everything else. I just wanted to throw out that alliance name thing. I think that's just honestly just one of the best named alliances of Survivor history, because not even, like, probably half of them have a name at all. And that's something I want more of. So if you're a future Survivor player listening to this podcast, thanks. You're awesome. You're getting great advice from two great Survivor fans.
Yeah.
B, name your alliances. It's cooler when you do that. It almost always ends up on camera, so you'll get extra screen time. And, I don't know, have fun with it.
No.
Name your alliances.
I guess unless you name your alliance Ride or Die, and then it doesn't get brought up until the final tribal council.
Yeah, okay, that's just a bad name, though. Maybe clever names. Okay, I'll preface it again. Clever, cool, good alliance names.
Like Tres Leches?
Like the Mason-Dixon line. Like the California Girls. Something that you can... The Brochacho. Something you can remember.
Yeah.
And be like, oh, that alliance was sick. Even if it didn't work out.
I love myself some Mason-Dixon.
So yeah, we'll wrap it up with that.
All right, well, like Connor said, that's all we have to say, and so we hope you enjoyed the video. We hope you look forward to the next one. But the pod has spoken.